We've talked about on this channel about true crime with botched or what they call unnecessary executions, people who were brought to justice who were not guilty, they were executed. But in this case, the person that was brought to justice didn't die at the gallows. He was brought to the gallows, but lived to tell the tale many times, because he eventually lived another, well, some people say 60 years, and I don't know if that's true or not, but it kind of makes a lot of sense. Now, William Duell, born 1723 in England, when he was 17 in 1740, he was convicted of being an accessory to the rape of one Sarah Griffin in Acton, London, England. Now, he was sentenced to death by British Common Court. Now, on the 24th of November 1740, he was hanged in Tyburn along with 4 others. Now, according to published reports, his body hung for about 20 minutes before being cut down. It was then brought to the surgeon's hall to go through an autopsy for a rabbinical training college, a common practice at the time. Now, Duell was eventually stripped and laid on the board, about to be dissected. However, one of the servants noticed that he began breathing slowly. For some reason, Duell's breath got quicker and quicker. He was then bled, and in 2 hours he was able to sit upright. That night he was taken back to prison in Newgate. Now, Duell, suffering from a fever and delirium during his trial execution, had no recollection of the hanging. According to doctors that treated him, it was suggested that his bad state was what ultimately saved his life. By the following day, he was back to full health. Meanwhile, the public had apparently found out what happened to Duell, and there was great excitement over his case. Now, the authorities, fearing the retribution of a second execution, which might have been botched as well, decided to change his sentence to penal transportation. Let's put this in perspective. Because UK had numerous colonies overseas, Australia, North America, or whatever, sometimes prisoners were banished from England. He was eventually exiled for life to North America. Where he ended up was allegedly in the Boston area, and was reported to have died sometime in 1805. So 65 years after his initial execution, he passed away from, probably at age 82, was natural causes. So he went from being an accused rapist, not a murderer, of course, a rapist, was brought to the gallows, suffering from some kind of physical problem, probably shock of being put on trial, and here he is. He survives the gallows, is bled to death. His delirium and his high fever is reduced, and he's back to himself the next day. So, in the many cases of execution across what they call the British Commonwealth, this is the only one I remember, or was taught, that it wasn't an execution for murder. It was an execution for accessory to the rape of somebody. So a very heavy burden. But this is one of the cases where it was pointed to in the British common law, because they don't do guillotine in British common law. They don't do execution in their means but hanging. So in this case, the guy, and he hung for 20 minutes. So either the rope wasn't correct or the rope was a little bit too slack, and I don't know. And because he was suffering from high fever, maybe there wasn't enough oxygen in his system to be hung correctly. Anyway, he survived. So if anybody knows some of the history of Duell in family in the Boston region, I would suspect he does have some relatives since then, and be interesting to see exactly why he lived so long after such a traumatic event. You never know with the human body what it can survive. So this is the latest of our true crime podcast in tribute to the Canadian published book They Were Hanged of the mid-1980s, which detailed the last executions in each province and territory across Canada. When I do this, it's a public service, not to exploit it, but to provide information on the history of executions across mostly North America and the British common law system. Thanks for listening. Bye.